Hello friends, and welcome again to a Walk in the Garden Bible study. This is part 3 in our study of Genesis chapter 31. And if you recall from our last lesson, we saw where Jacob had taken his wives and taken his family and taken all of his possessions, and they departed from the land of Pandanaram. They departed from Mesopotamia there, and they were heading back to the land of Canaan to go back to his family there, Isaac and Rebekah and the rest of his family. And they had taken off unbeknownst to Laban, his uncle. They'd taken off undercover. They didn't want Laban to know about it. They knew that he would hinder them and he'd try to stop them, and he'd probably lay some more guilt trips on them. And so they left unbeknownst to him. And well, 3 days later, Laban found out about their departure, and he was upset about it. And so he gathered all his family members and his entourage, and they took off pursuing Jacob and his family. And one of the waypoints along the way was, and this is what Jacob had his sights set on, was Mount Gilead. That was kind of a waypoint. That was a marker area for him. And so that's where they were heading towards. And for 7 days, Laban and his group had pursued them, and they finally had caught up to them. But we saw the day before that he encountered with Jacob that the Lord had actually spoke to Laban, and he had instructed him and kind of gave him a warning. He said, take heed. And he says, don't speak ill or don't speak, against what Jacob's doing, because it's of the Lord. And so he kind of gave him just a booster shot, you might say, of spiritual enlightenment there. And so Laban had a choice to make the next day when he was going to encounter Jacob. So we saw where they had their first encounter, and that's where we're going to pick it up there in verses 25 through 35 of Genesis chapter 31. And here the Bible says, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, and with tabret, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Hast thou done foolishly in so doing? It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldst needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. For I said, peradventure thou wouldst take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine, and with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images, and put them in the camel's furniture, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. So here we see Laban's first encounter with Jacob after they'd been pursuing him all these many days, and his temper had been flaring, and he'd been probably just contemplating and thinking about all the things he was going to do to Jacob once he caught up to him and got a hold of him. And then the Lord kind of quenched his spirit there and calmed him down and put him in a different disposition. But he still wanted to get his point across to Jacob that he was not happy about what he did. And of course, Laban's manner was that he's going to put a guilt trip on Jacob and turn the tables and make it look like that he was the bad guy, that he was doing evil by what he did, that he was, it was like, oh me, oh poor me, and that's what a lot of people do, is when they're the ones that are in the wrong, they're the ones that are doing the evil towards somebody, but somehow they always manage to turn the table and make themselves look like the victim. And it turns out the ones that were doing the good work and doing things faithfully and doing things honestly are the ones that end up looking like the bad guys. And so that's what they do. And we see that's what Laban has done here. And so he's trying to make it out that Jacob was totally in the wrong, that he was totally disrupting the family and did basically, he says it was just as if you stole my daughters away with a sword and took them captives, And so that's what he was kind of relaying. And so what was Laban's first question? Well, he says, "What hast thou done?" He's questioning Jacob's motives for sneaking away unawares, putting the blame on Jacob. In other words, how could you have done such a thing? How could you have been such a lowlife and done this unseemly thing to me and taken my family away without me even being able to send them off with a good tidings and maybe send them off with some gifts and being able to hug them and kiss them and just show my love for them, and we could have had pomp and circumstance and had a party and had a going away party and so forth, which more than likely he would never have done. But that's what he's telling him that he would have done, just to make him feel bad and to put the bad light on him. And he says, "I would gladly have sent you away with a great gaiety. You deprived me of a proper send-off. I would gladly have celebrated. But you've robbed me from all that, and you took off just like a bandit who not only stole my possessions, as I'd mentioned before, but now you'd actually stole my family as well without letting me see them." Indicating that, he was putting the indication out there that Jacob took them by force, that they really didn't want to go. They wanted to see their father. They wanted to, meet with him before they left and get his blessing. But that wasn't the case at all. But that's what Laban's trying to make it out to be. And so he says, my intentions, he says, now, because of what you've done, my intentions would have been to punish you. I have the power. I have the ability to do you hurt and great harm. And that's probably what very well would have happened and should have happened and well deservingly would have happened if the God of your father hadn't persuaded me to do otherwise. And so what do we see Jacob's response is here? Well, he says, "I was afraid that you would take your daughters by force and not allow them to leave." So here we have Laban accusing Jacob of taking his daughters by force. And then Jacob just turns it back on him and says, "Well, I was afraid that you would take your daughters by force and not allow them to leave, thereby making me and forcing me to stay there, Laban, like basically you've done for 20 years already." So, think about that. And so he just kind of asks him, or puts the rhetorical response back to him. And it wasn't really, at the heart of the matter, wasn't really the fact that he left unawares. It wasn't the fact that he took his daughters without them being able to get a send-off. The heart of the matter was he didn't want Jacob to leave in the first place, so he's already angry about that. But then when he discovered his gods were missing, then that just, that was like the crowning point of the whole matter. I mean, that just inflamed him even more. And then he had a passion to get, vengeance upon Jacob, to get even with him, and to take his wrath out on him and make him pay for what he did. I mean, how dare he take all of his possessions with the animals, take all of his family, and on top of that, take his very gods themselves. And so that's what he's angry about. But he's thinking these things, and that's what Jacob says. He says, "I was fearful that you would allow my family to leave and thereby make me stay as well, and you don't serve my God, so I figured you probably wouldn't care if I told you that it was as per God's instructions." But then he drops the matter and moves on. And then what does Laban say? He says, "Where?" So he kind of sweeps that aside, sweeps it under the rug, because he doesn't want to address that issue anymore. And he says, "Wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" And this was really partly at the heart of the matter with Laban. I mean, it wasn't really the fact that Jacob had left. It wasn't really the fact that he took his daughters and his grandchildren. But what really put him over the top and what really got his ire up was this issue about his gods. Someone had stolen his gods, something that was most important to him. Those were his good luck charms. Those were his patrons. Those were his security. And those were, what kept him in business and had made him successful all these years, basically. Even though he had given credit to Jacob's God for, prospering him while Jacob was there, more than he had been. And someone had the audacity to steal them away. But that just shows you the fallacy. And, this is still going on today. I mean, nothing has changed. I mean, you see these heathen countries. And the Bible really, the Bible is so precise and concise in dealing with all matters. It's as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. It's as relevant today as, if the Lord tarries, it'll still be relevant in the next 1,000 years. But it applies to all generations because people are people, no matter what technology we have available, no matter what modern appliances or modern media or methods we have of communicating or traveling or whatever, as smart as we think we are, smart as we think we can become, we haven't changed. We've still got the same human nature that we had from the very beginning. And, heathen nations that have veered away from the true God of creation through the years, through the centuries, through the generations. They've developed their own religions. And they've done exactly what the Bible, one thing that God hates is graven images or things that will try to strive to have some kind of competition with His glory. And they'll do that. They'll make things out of wood. They'll make things out of iron. They'll make things out of gold, out of ivory, whatever. And you see them everywhere. They sell them in stores. You could buy a god in the store and then put it in your house. And maybe you need the monk to bless it or something. Maybe you need somebody to put their blessing on it or put some holy water on it to make it official. But then you can worship that God. And I guess it's just the heathenistic nature of mankind, the sinful nature, is that, we want to see things. And that's why we serve a God by faith, not something that can be touched with our hands or felt with our hands. But it's with our spirit we reach out to Him, and He touches our spirit. And that's the God we serve. We serve a God of faith. And we're to walk by faith as Christians and not by sight. Because if we can build something with our own hands and attribute some kind of power to that, and attribute some kind of ability to that, then that's our own works. And that means that God's Son would basically be of none effect in our life. If we can do it ourselves and serve something ourselves and have that bless us, turn around and bless us. But that's the fallacy, is that you can build these gods, you can have them in your house, you can worship them, and yet they're powerless against even a common thief can come in and steal them away. We see that with the Great Pyramids. When the grave robbers came through, they did the best of their abilities of securing these pyramids, of hiding, putting booby traps, of making the entrances hidden to where nobody could ever, but guess what? Somebody did eventually get in, dug it out, found the tombs, found the hidden crypts in there, and got to the goods and the riches and the mummies and everything else that was in there. And, you go to some of these countries and you'll see their gods out being sold in the marketplace. And then sometimes if they don't do too good or they don't look good, you'll see them laying in the ditch, and so, it's just such a fallacy. And if people would stop to consider for a moment that there's a creator God who's above and beyond anything that we could ever comprehend, and He's the one that we should be serving and worshiping, and not something that man conjures up in their own minds. But evidently this is what Laban was caught up in, because he says they're his gods. And of course we know that Jacob wasn't privy to this. He had no knowledge of it. Rachel had done it undercover, and we talked about that in our last lesson, that we gave out some options there and some possible reasons that she did it. But the point is that she did it, and she didn't want anybody to know about it because she was afraid they might not let her get away with it. And perhaps she thought they would get away and have enough lead time and be able to escape without, having any repercussion from it or being found out about. And so he makes this charge. Laban, or actually Jacob, had made this charge. He made this charge just as he had demonstrated his uprightness and his practice of honesty to Laban before when taking care of his livestock. Because you remember he said before, when they had the agreement with the livestock, he said, if you find any of these animals that are in my herds that don't have the markings that they're supposed to have, then you can count them as stolen with me, and then take appropriate actions to gain them back or to, discipline me accordingly. I mean, that's how strongly he was going to be honest and upright about his affairs. And so again, we see the integrity of Jacob right here. The fact that he's saying, look, let whoever, if somebody in my tribe, he was this strongly about it, but he's also pretty certain that nobody, he knew his people, and he knew how honest and upright they were. And he couldn't conceive that one of his own had done this thing. And so he just makes that statement. He says, if you find out who did it, let me know, and they'll get the death penalty. We'll put them to death. Because I'm not aware of it, Laban. If we've got it, I'm not aware of it. And if somebody did it, then they deserve to die. That's basically what he says. He says, if somebody's stolen your property, Laban, then you have the right to take out wrath on them, even to the extent of taking their life. What does he say? He says, let them not live. And with that, Laban had his authorized search warrant. And so what does he do like a good inspector would or a good detective would? Well, they're going to set out and search the premises and see if they can find the goods. And so he now has exclusive permission to do that very thing and to try to find who the culprit is that took his property. And so they begin searching the tents one by one. And so the heat was on. And I'm sure that Rachel was pretty nervous at this point. In her mind, she was trying to figure out what in the world she could do, and I'm sure she was there when she heard what Jacob had said. So she was in double trouble, you might say, and she had double pressure on her at this moment. But she was pretty wily. She was pretty savvy. And she evidently had learned a lot from Jacob, being the trickster that he was known to be. And so she, meanwhile, I don't know if she did it beforehand, or maybe this is where she already had them stored beforehand when they were transporting, so nobody would find out about them. But it said she'd put them in the camel's furniture. So evidently this was, some type of seat or perhaps a pillow, but something that they would normally sit on for comfort. And she had taken those and she had put them and hid them and tucked them away into the camel's furniture there. But again, we just have to see, the fallacy of false idol images and these gods that still exist today in many cultures. The fact that they can be misplaced. The fact that they can be lost. They can be broken. They can be defaced. They can be forgotten about. And they can even be deteriorated. I mean, I've seen somewhere through the ages the outer paste or the outer coating has come off. They've got mold on them. They've got weeds growing up around them. People have neglected them. And yet at one time these were venerated images that demanded worship. But they have no abilities. They have no power. They have no minds, no movement. But simply they're crafted images and gifted with divine qualities conjured up in the minds of men. Well, with that, we're going to pick it up at verses 36 through 42. And here we read, and Jacob was wroth, and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. But my hand didst thou require it. by my hand thou didst require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was, in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction, and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Well, we see where, Laban had searched all of the tents. They'd one by one, Jacob's tent, Leah's tent. They got to Rachel's tent, and she stayed seated upon that piece of camel's furniture. And of course she gave him the reasoning. She says, Father, forgive me for not getting up, but the manner of women is upon me. So it's my time, and so I can't rise right now, otherwise I would out of respect. But by doing that, she secured that piece of furniture. So she secured that property. And so now, after all this is said and done, all of the searching is done, they haven't found anything. And that just made Jacob angry. He felt embarrassed. He felt intruded upon. I mean, it's just like if somebody came into your house and you were being falsely accused of stealing something from the store or whatever the case is, maybe from your neighbor, and the police had a search warrant, and they come in and start rummaging through your drawers and rummaging through your bedroom and getting into your private areas and just going through your whole house, ransacking it, looking, and completely know that you're innocent. So there's nothing there, but you're willing to submit to it. But when they get done, you feel humiliated. You feel humiliated. I mean, if you went to a store and they accused you of shoplifting, and they took you aside in front of everybody and took you in the room and they made you dump your purse out, dump your pockets out, and in your mind that you didn't take anything. And at first you're just being cordial, but as time goes on, you get humiliated. And as a result of being humiliated, you get a little bit testy and a little bit angry. And so that's where Jacob's at now. It says he chode with Laban. He argued with him. He was upset. He was mad. He said, look, you hotly pursued me for 7 days. For what? I didn't even, I left on my own accord. I left, your daughters, they gave me their permission. We left as a family unit. We didn't owe you anything. We didn't really even owe you an explanation, especially after the way you've treated me for the past 20 years. And now you're accusing me of stealing from you on top of everything else. So Jacob's ire was up. I mean, he felt invaded. He felt violated. He felt falsely accused. And now he will elevate his complaint. He'll wrangle with Laban and hotly contend his case. He will clearly now going to lay it all out. He's going to lay it all out on the line, just put it all plainly out there. And what he's been wanting to say for a while, he's just going to go ahead and say it. And so he starts stating the facts and the events that he himself has been subject to. Laban's complaining about his demise and his endurance of, what Jacob's done to him just recently. But Jacob's like, look, I've been building this up for 20 years. I'm going to let you have it with both barrels. I'm not going to hold anything back. So he defends himself against these unreasonable charges against him. What does he say? He says, what is my trespass, Laban? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? What have I done to deserve a 7-day pursuit? That I would be hunted down like a criminal, or that I've committed some grave scandalous activity, and now you've found nothing, you've come up empty-handed. Have I unjustly taken your possessions? Have I injured someone in your family? What have I done to deserve this type of treatment? To be treated like a criminal, to be treated like somebody on the run, to be treated like a murderer that escaped out of prison. He says, you've thoroughly searched all my stuff and found nothing. And if you found something, well then go ahead, let's see it now. Let's lay it out here before everybody. Bring it forward. Bring your clan forward. Bring everybody forward. And we'll get my family together, get your family together, and bring it out here so everybody can see it and be a witness to what I've done, to what I've stolen. He says, and we'll let the families judge between me and thee to see who's in the right and who's in the wrong. For 20 years, 20 laborious years, I've served you, Laban. 14 long, grueling years I served you to gain my wives. And then 6 extra years, you wanted me to stay and take care, and so I did. And so 6 extra years I stayed to gain my property, to gain the cattle and the herds that you would never give me willingly. But the Lord saw to it that he said, if it had been up to you, you'd have left me left with nothing. You'd have left me high and dry. You'd have left me go a pauper and kept everything for yourself. And now suddenly when I decide to leave, all of a sudden I'm guilty of some major crime. You know, you tried to accuse me back there at your house, but now you're accusing me. And, you know, what does he go on to say? He says, even when the animals were stolen or eaten by wild predators or died of various means, I still treated you fairly. I didn't even take those out of your stock like I could have. He says, I didn't bring it to you for reimbursement. I just ate the loss. And the reason he did that was because he was trying to be a peacemaker. He was trying to keep peace in the household, to keep peace in the family, and he was looking out for his wives. He says, I bore the responsibility, and I took it upon myself to resolve the issue and make it right. I didn't come to you. I didn't tell you that you owed me something or that you needed to reimburse me or that, you know, I needed to be compensated for it. And he says, I bore the challenges not only of that, but of famines that came upon us. And the extra work and the stress of keeping things rolling during those times. I mean, I lost sleep. I was out in the heat of the day. I was out sometimes without proper nourishment or water. And for 20 years, Laban, 20 years of my life, I lived that type of lifestyle. And if you remember, I came hither for a short sojourn and just a period of time to find a wife. But because of your conniving ways, I've been working on your behalf for 20 long years. And even when you tried to rob me of my wages, you know, you want to call me evil? You want to call me a criminal? You want to say that I'm stealing from you? When you tried to trick me and tried to put the gain on your side and tried to unjustly not pay me what you owed me, he said, you changed my wages 10 different times in an effort to make an outcome that would come in your favor. And he said, even when you did all that and you tried to keep me under your thumb, I stuck it out and continued, even though I had to bite my tongue for many times, for 20 years. And it was only by God's divine outreach and God's provision and God's guidance and direction that I was able to leave with anything at all. Under your management, I would have left poorer than when I came. But God saw to it that I would prosper and leave with much gain after all. And don't forget how God rebuked thee last night as well. This God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and now the God of Jacob, this is the God who assures me of my safety and success and protection. He saw what I did. He saw what I've done, and He intervened on my behalf. So don't forget that, Laban, if you're still considering anything. But basically, he just says, take that. So Jacob lays it out there and makes it pretty clear. He doesn't make any bones about it. Doesn't try to tap dance around it any longer. He just says, this is the time I've got to lay it out. Well, we're going to have to leave off there. We'll pick it up next time in verses 43 through 55 of chapter 31. And we're going to see there where, we're going to see what Jacob's going to do after this encounter with Laban, and after that finally gets all settled. And as his manner is, he's going to set up a memorial. And they're going to set up a kind of a, if you will, a border crossing area. And we're going to see, these are just some of the first attributes of some of the things that we even see going on today between lands, between states, between countries, and between just different people groups. And so here's where some of these things had their beginnings, and there was reasons for it. We're going to be looking more at that in our next lesson. We hope to see you then. Thanks.